Hey guys, it's Blue Eyes Master 91, and I thought today would be a good day to preview the deck I'll be using at the Indianapolis Regionals Tournament this upcoming weekend. So let's get into it. So for this regional, I opted to go with Swordsoul Tenyi. It's always been a deck on my to build and play list. It just was always kind of out of my price range until recently when everything got reprinted. So starting off, I am running 3 copies of, I'm going to butcher a lot of these names, so please forgive me. Swordsoul Strategist Long Yin. He is one of the best special summons in the deck. To special summon him, all you have to do is reveal another worm monster, which, spoiler alert, every monster in this deck except 3 are worms. So you reveal a worm or another Swordsoul card, you can special summon him out, and then you get a token, which I do have a lot of tokens that I keep with the deck, just because I know I need them. So you special summon him out, and then you can go into your Synchro 10 plays, which would be any of these 3 monsters. We'll get into more of what they do later, but these are your 3 level 10 Synchro plays. Or monsters, rather. Next, also, when you use him to Synchro summon, you deal your opponent 1,200 points of damage. As soon as the monster hits the board, you can deal 1,200 points of damage. So, moving on, we have 3 copies of Swordsoul Moyi. Moyi is one of the few normal summons in the deck if you really want to normal summon him. If he is normal or special summon, you can reveal a Swordsoul monster in your hand or a worm in your hand, and you get a token. I should clarify with the strategist, you have to discard the other worm or Swordsoul card. I don't believe I said that before. So I do want to clarify that. You need to discard another worm or a Swordsoul card to get the token effect and to special summon him. With Moyi, you just reveal it in your hand and you get the token. But he needs to be normal or special summoned for that effect. And then when he's used as synchro material, you get to draw a card. So with him and, well, the bulk of the rest of the deck, actually, you can go into Synchro 8 plays. And there are a lot of Synchro 8 plays you can go into. Berserker is one of my favorites. You can go into Grandmaster if you want. We have Adamantipator, 2 Yang Zing, and then the other Yang Zing. As of right now, because my profile is submitted for the tournament, I am not running the Yang Zing card that just came off the ban list. I did not have any copies in my collection, and I was not about to risk it not coming in before the tournament. So it'll be a card I consider in future builds, and I'll probably play around with the card. But I have, as of right now, no desire to use Dailong, I think is the name, and I don't want any more monsters in the deck. It's already fairly monster heavy, in my opinion. So next we have 2 copies of Swordsoul Taya. This is the last main deck Swordsoul monster. When he is summoned, it's not even, it doesn't specify that at all. When he's on the field, basically, you can banish a worm or Swordsoul card to get a token to synchro summon the level 8 monsters. I will say this as well. All the tokens are level 4. And when a token is on the field, you are unable to summon anything else from the extra deck except synchro monsters. You have to get rid of this token before you can go into Xyz plays, Link plays, anything like that. You have to have the token off the board. Otherwise, you cannot do anything except synchro summon. When Taya is used for synchro material, you get to send a worm, or is it a specific... You get to send a Swordsoul or worm from your deck to the graveyard. So, all three Swordsoul main deck monsters are very different, but very similar at the same time. They each revolve around having a worm or Swordsoul card in your hand or in the graveyard. At least in Taya's case, the graveyard. There's a really, really cool combo with Taya. Because it's easy enough to negate their effects to get the token. But if you banish your Swordsoul Blackout, which is a one of in this deck, you can still get a token on the field. So, something to keep in mind. So, for the rest of the monsters in the deck, we have 3 copies of the Incredible Ecclesia the Virtuous. She is a spellcaster light monster. When your opponent has more monsters than you do, you can special summon her. And then you can immediately use her effect, her secondary effect, I should say, to send her to the graveyard to special summon out a, is it specifically Swordsoul? Yep. So, during the main phase quick effect, you contribute this card, special summon one Swordsoul monster or Fallen of Alabaz from your hand or deck. During the end phase, if a fusion monster was sent to the graveyard this turn, add this card to your hand. So, we are not playing any fusion cards. We are not running Alabaz in this deck. Ecclesia is simply a means to an end to special summon out your Swordsoul monsters from the deck. She's a fantastic starter if you are going second. This deck does not brick often, but when it does, it's usually fairly bad. At least from my experiences on EDO player recently. It's been bricking a lot more on EDO than I'd like to admit. But in real life, I have not had a very big issue with it bricking. So there's that. Next, we have 3 copies of, and again, I will probably butcher a lot of these names. Tenyi Spirit Ashuna. And with all the Tenyi monsters, their main effects are pretty much the same. If you do not have a effect monster on the field, you can special summon it. So if you're in your opening hand, if you have 3 different Tenyi monsters, you can special summon one. Link it away for the Link 1 Monk. Special summon another one. Which would probably be this, actually. Use those 2 to link into the Link 2. Normal summon this. And then link into the Link 3. It's not a great workaround to a bad hand, but it works. Its other effect is when you control a non-effect monster, so your copies of Monk, your Berserker, and all the tokens are considered non-effect monsters. So if you control a token or any of these 3, you can utilize the second effect of the Tenyi monsters. All except for the water one, which is different, and we'll get into that too. So the secondary effect for Ashana is you can banish it from your hand or graveyard to special summon out another Tenyi monster. So the other workaround to a slightly bad hand. Oh. Sorry, that was my phone. Is you link into your Monk, and then you can immediately use Ashana's effect to special summon out another Tenyi monster from your deck. So lots of combos, lots of things going on with this deck. We have 2 copies of Adhira. Adhira is the lowest level monster in the deck at level 1. Once again, he can be special summoned from your hand if you do not control a effect monster. And then his secondary effect, which is the more useful of the two, obviously is level 1, so it can be normal summoned if needed, is you can banish it from your hand or graveyard while you have a non-effect monster, which again are your 2 copies of Monk, the Link 3 Berserker tenyi, or any tokens, any of the Swordsoul tokens. You can banish this from your hand or graveyard to add one of your banished worm monsters back to your hand, which is a really, really cool effect. He is also a level 1 tuner, which Ashuna is, let's see here, 2, 4, level 7. Sorry, I don't generally use it to synchro summon, so anyway, so you could use him to go into your level 8 synchro plays if you want as well. There are a lot of ways to go into your level 8 synchro plays. There's not a lot of ways to go into your level 10 synchro plays. So, let me just clean up a little bit. Next, we have 2 copies of Tenyi Spirit Bashuda. Maybe I'm not going to butcher these completely. Once again, Bashuda can be special summoned from your hand if you have no effect monsters on the field. And then, if you have a non-effect monster on your board, you can banish this card from your hand or graveyard. Target 1 card your opponent controls, return it to the hand. So, this is really good for dealing with, I guess not so much Kashtira anymore because it isn't going to be that big of an issue. But it could help against Vanquish Soul, possibly Trap Trick if they have Skill Drain on the field, and any other deck that can get big boards. Yeah, and I believe this is also level 7. Yeah, this is also level 7. So next we have the single copy of Tenyi Spirit Shahana. It is a level 4 water monster. I also want to point out that all the Tenyi monsters are different attributes, which so are the Swordsoul monsters. You have a Fire Swordsoul, a Water Swordsoul, and then a Wind. Ecclesia is light, Ashuna is light, and Adhira is earth. All the tokens are going to be water. Well, aqua. Once again, this can be special summoned from your hand if you have no effect monsters. His effect is different than the others, only because of his secondary effect. If a face-up non-effect monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish this card from your hand or graveyard, then target one of those destroyed monsters, special summon it, then you can destroy one monster your opponent controls. You can only use each of these effects once per turn, and that is the other thing. They are hard once to turns. But this card has saved me a lot, the Water Tenyi Spirit, because of that destruction effect. Because you get your monster back, and then you get to pop something and send it to the grave, which is really, really useful. Moving on to the hand trap monster cards, we have 3 Ash and 2 Nib. I don't think I need to go into details about why these are in the deck. Moving right along for the spell cards, we have 3 copies of Emergence. Emergence is your Rhoda of the deck. You search out a Swordsoul monster and add it to your hand. Also, if it is banished, you get to change your monster's level by 1, I believe. Yep. You can. If this card is banished, you can target one Sword Soul or Worm monster you control. Increase its level by 1 until the end of the turn. So there are ways to go into your other level 10 monsters using that as a card. It's just not likely going to happen. I very rarely banish banish the spell. I usually banish Blackout. We have our single copy of Summit, which is a monster reborn of sorts. It lets you revive a Swordsoul monster in the graveyard. Or if you control a synchro monster, you can target a worm monster instead and special summon that. So with Summit, you can either special summon back out one of your Swordsoul cards. So you can revive your 2 level 10 synchros or your 2 level 8. With that effect, or you can revive one of your monsters. Main deck monsters, rather. Or if you do have a synchro on the field, you can revive just a worm monster, which is a lot more useful, in my opinion. Getting into the non-Swordsoul spells, we have a single copy of Vessel. Vessel lets you send a worm monster from your deck to the grave, or if you control a non-effect monster, you can add the card to your hand instead. It does have to be a tenyi of a different name. So you would sell Foolish one worm and then add a tenyi to your hand. And like a lot of the cards in this deck, they are all once a turn. So this is a once a turn. The Emergence and Summit are both once a turns as well. We then have a single copy of Dragon Cycle. Tribute one worm. Add a worm from your deck to your hand, or if you tributed a non-effect monster to activate this effect, you can special summon it instead, but negate its effects. During the main phase, if you control a non-effect monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard. Add a tenyi card from your deck to your hand. You can only use one Heavenly Dragon Circle effect per turn, and only once that turn. So that is a very hard once a turn. You can only use one of the effects per turn. So it's useful. It doesn't actually, I haven't really used it, but I like the versatility with it. Next we have 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talon, 2 Crossout, 2 Book of Eclipse. Tactics is because hand traps exist and you can easily draw 2 cards. Among other effects, you can, look at your opponent's hand or take control of one of their monsters. I almost always just draw 2. It's the easiest effect to use and the one that has the most benefit, especially in this deck. Crossout, I don't use as much. I usually side them out almost immediately, or at least 1 copy. But it has come up in a couple of matches. And then Book of Lunar Eclipses is really good for stalling your opponent, basically. So, yeah. They're in here to kind of troll your opponent. Next we have Feather Duster. Because as good as Twin Twisters is, and as good as Cosmic Cyclone is, Feather Duster is a lot better. You do not have to pay life points. You do not have to discard. Yes, it is not a quick play spell, but it is so much better. And then we have 2 copies of Pot of Desires. I just put the second copy in this week. It just came in and I ordered it almost a month ago. So there's that, which is why I was kind of nervous about ordering a bunch of other cards. I usually side out 1 copy for game 2 because I almost never use both. Or I won't use both in any case. an EDO player, I have used both and I've come away winning, but the win has felt kind of shallow only because I'm sitting there with a monster with over, 7k attack and I just swing into something. So it doesn't feel as good. Diving into the traps now, I know I mentioned it earlier, but Swordsoul Blackout. Its first effect is you tribute a worm monster on the field. And target one worm you control and 2 cards your opponent controls, destroy them. If this card is banished, you can special summon one Swordsoul token, Worm Tuner Water level 4, 0/0. While that token is in the monster zone, the player who summoned it cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except synchros. You can only use each effect of Swordsoul Blackout once per turn. So, yeah, that is... I really love that trap card. It's one of my favorites to use because it irritates the hell out of my opponents. And then for the last 5 cards, we have 3 copies of Imperm and 2 evenly. I will usually set out at least 1 copy of Imperm, depending on if I use them or see them game 1. If I do not see them, I tend to side them out. Same thing with 1 of the copies of Nib. Because honestly, if you nib someone once, they're going to be a little bit more cautious on summoning more than 5 times in the same match. And then they'll be cautious game 2 anyway. So that is it for the main deck. Before I dive into the extra deck, I do want to quickly touch on what is in my side deck. Just because it's kind of important. So in the side deck we have 2 copies of Lava Golem because I will side out at least 1 copy of Nibiru for a Golem. And it still trolls the hell out of your opponent. I have a single copy of Jinzo. He is only in here to deal with trap tricks for the most part. So it doesn't matter if he dies or not. Plus, he would be capable of going to your Synchro 10s as well because he is a level 6 monster. I have a single copy of Lancia. This was initially at 2, but because Kashtira is no longer going to be king of the tier, and they can no longer banish half your deck in 1 turn, I dropped it down to 1, and it seems to be running fine. I also noticed that using Lancia can kind of brick this deck because you need to be able to banish. Next we have Dark Hole, Raigeki, Lightning Storm. Dark Hole and Raigeki are in here because they can board wipe. Lightning Storm can board wipe or get rid of your back row, or your opponent's back row. So that's always useful. Always. Next we have 2 copies of D-Barrier, 2 copies of Rivalry of the Warlords. Barriers in here to help counteract Cash, Striker, Despia, and Trap Tricks to an extent. I haven't actually had an excuse to really side it in, but on the occasions I have, it has come in handy. Next we have 2 copies of Anti-Spell, and then a single copy of Royal Decree rounds out the main deck, side deck options. I do have 1 more card in the side deck. Let me just clean up a little bit. So the last card in the side deck was initially in the main deck until I got the idea to put in the Link 3 tenyi monster. So I have Ice Jade, Gyram Anjin, Again, I apologize if I butcher the hell out of that name. It is a 3K beat stick with 1500 defense. It is a level 10, so another level 10 play. It does need a water tuner, which this deck provides in spades. Quick effect, you can activate this effect. Face-up monsters you control cannot be destroyed by or banished by your opponent's card effects this turn. Then if you activated this effect in response to your opponent's cards, opponent's card or effect activation, and your opponent has a card with that name on their field or in the graveyard, you can banish those cards. If a card is banished by your opponent's card effect while this card is in your graveyard, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card. It's a useful monster, but with Kashtira no longer being in, no longer being able to banish off your deck on turn 1, with the recent ban list, I don't know if I'll keep it in past the regional tournament. So that's it for my side deck. Let's dive into the extra deck. So I don't think there's a lot of cards I really need to go into detail with. We have Baron. We have our Supreme Sovereign, Chen Ying. We have Sinister Sovereign, Kwang Longhan. Again, I do apologize if I butcher the names. Basically, you have 2 negates in Baron and the Synchro 10 Longhan. He has a lot of really, really fun effects. The first one is if you Synchro summon a worm while this card is on the field, you get to draw a card. If your opponent special summons a monster except during the damage step, you can banish one of those monsters, and if you do, inflict 1200 points of damage. When your opponent activates a spell, trap, or quick effect, you can banish that card, and if you do, inflict 1200 points. So each turn you can possibly deal out 2400 points of damage. And you can only use each of these effects once a turn. So while they are once a turn effects, you can use both. And following the trend, we have wind, water, and fire. Next, we have our Dark in Berserker the Tenyi, who is one of my favorite monsters. He is, yet again, another 3K beat stick. When your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can banish it. If this card destroys an effect monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, this card gains the attack of the destroyed monster. It is the original attack, however. Keep that in mind, please. And then it can attack a second time. So, he can get very, very big by killing effect monsters. And it's a lot of fun to see him go boom, because he is fun. I know I have not really talked about the Sovereign here, the water. He is a 3K attack and defense, and his effect is, once again, one of my favorite effects in the deck. For each banished card, this card gains 100 attack and defense, and monsters your opponent controls lose 100 attack and defense. This card would be destroyed by card effect. You can banish one card from your graveyard instead. If a card is banished, except during the damage step, you can banish one card from both your opponent's field and graveyard. So, he not only weakens your opponent's monsters, and allows you to banish a bunch of stuff to weaken their boards, but he's just fun. He's easily the best endgame you can get into. So next we have 2 copies of Swordsoul Grandmaster Chiax, which is a light level 8. If this card is synchro summon, you can add to your hand or banish one Swordsoul card from your deck. Quick effect, you can banish a Swordsoul card or worm monster from your hand or graveyard, then target one other effect monster on the field, negate its effect until the end of this turn. You can only use one Grandmaster effect per turn and only once that turn. So he is a very hard once a turn on both those effects, which is kind of bad, but not. I really like adding either Summit, Emergence, or I will occasionally add Taya, depending on the situation. Next, we have Adamancipator Risen Dragite, which is a 3,000 attack, 2,200 defense monster. Again, level 8. During your main phase, you can excavate the top 5 cards of your deck, and if you do, you can return cards your opponent controls to their hand up to the number of excavated rock monsters. Also, place the excavated rock monster or excavated cards on the bottom of the deck in any order. When your opponent activates a spell or trap or effect while a water monster is in your graveyard, quick effect, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. You can only use each effect once per turn. So, with Nib in the deck, you do have the ability to utilize the first effect, but it's the second effect, which is the negate effect, that is the most useful for if you summon out Risen Dragite, rather. Next, we have our 2 copies of the Yingzing Light and our single Yingzing Dark. Once again, both are level 8. When this card is synchro summoned, you can target cards on the field up to the number of different original attributes of the worm monsters used for the synchro summon of this card. Shuffle them into the deck. Once per turn, you can target one card you control and one level 4 or lower monster in your graveyard. Destroy that card on the field, and if you do, special summon the other monster from the graveyard. So, resource recycling is useful with that effect, with those effects rather. As for Yazi Evil the Yangzing, your opponent cannot target this card on the field with card effects. You can only use each effect of Yazi once per turn. You can target one Yangzing monster you control and one card your opponent controls. Destroy them. When this card you control is destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to your graveyard, you can special summon a word from your deck in defense. So, really, really useful in special summoning out monsters, recycling cards, and getting rid of your opponent's cards, which is why they're in here. Next, we have our links. So, I went with the BLS link instead of another Yangzing Synchro, and that is because I initially was having problems with having a 1,000 attack monster and a 1,600 attack monster as link monsters sitting on my board, possibly turn 1. Instead, I can go into him, or I can go into Berserker. Either one is a viable option because they both have 3,000 attack. And they're both, link 3. What the heck? There we go. Then we have Shaman of the Tenyi. Shaman is a really, really cool card because, I can just read the effect. You can discard one card, then target a worm in your graveyard, special summon it. Also, for the rest of this turn, you cannot activate the effect of monster special. You cannot activate the effects of monster special summon from the extra deck except Tenyi monsters. When an attack is declared involving your face-up non-effect monster, you can target one card your opponent controls, destroy it. You can only use each effect once a turn. So, she's really useful because she lets you revive one of your 2 copies of Monk, which you'd likely use to summon her. And then her secondary effect allows you to protect the Monk. And then you have the Water Tenyi Spirit Monster that allows you to resummon Monk or Berserker if they were destroyed in battle somehow. Or by card effect. But that is it for this video. I know it is a little bit longer than normal. I do apologize for that. I will be trying to post videos more frequently. It's just been a little bit difficult lately. While I'm in Indianapolis, I do plan to possibly record profiles from some of the decks my friends are using. But that is it for this video. I will catch you guys in the next one. See ya.